German POWs mocked American shoes at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, 1944. From the barracks of Compound C, Hauptmann Wilhelm Brenner of the 352nd Infantry Division examined the leather boots worn by the American Guards. The footwear, normally dismissed as inferior, suddenly became objects of intense scrutiny. In his hand, Brenner held a worn pair of Wehrmacht standard-issue hobnailed boots, their soles cracked from the North African campaign. "These Americans know nothing about proper military equipment," he muttered to the men gathered around him. Yet his eyes lingered on the supple leather and cushioned soles of the guards' footwear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The story of German prisoners and American footwear reveals more than just a tale of shoes. It exposes the stark contrast between industrial capabilities, national priorities, and how small comforts shape the lives of those who fight. By 1944, over 378,000 German prisoners of war had been transported to American soil, housed in 511 camps across 45 states. Each man carried with him not just defeat, but deep-rooted beliefs about German superiority in all aspects of military equipment and design. At Camp Shelby, 3,000 prisoners populated a small city of wooden barracks surrounded by Mississippi pine forests. The camp's detailed records documented every aspect of prisoner life, including the ironic evolution of attitudes toward American-made goods. Quartermaster reports noted that incoming prisoners arrived with an average of 1.8 pairs of footwear, 87% of which were deemed severely worn, inadequate, or beyond repair. Meanwhile, American factories produced 11 million pairs of service shoes annually. Each soldier received 2 pairs upon enlistment and replacements as needed. The disparity in supply chains became immediately apparent to camp administrators, though prisoners maintained their contempt for what they called cardboard American shoes made by untrained factory girls. Captain James Whitfield, camp quartermaster, documented the initial reactions in his weekly report. German prisoners continued to express disdain for American equipment while standing in line to receive these same items when their own fail. The irony wasn't lost on the American Guards, who watched as proud Wehrmacht officers quietly requested replacement footwear when they thought no one was looking. The April 1944 supply manifest recorded 450 pairs of Type II service shoes allocated to POW replacements, alongside detailed notes about prisoner reactions. Initial rejection followed by grudging acceptance became a common refrain in official documentation. Behind these clinical assessments lay a deeper story of national pride confronting undeniable reality. Brenner had commanded a mechanized infantry company across France and North Africa. His personal diary, later archived at the Library of Military History, revealed the slow deterioration of German supply lines. Week 32, fuel rations cut again. Replacement boots promised but not delivered. Men wrapping canvas around footwear. This cannot continue. By the time of his capture near Kasserine Pass, his men had been wearing the same boots for 290 days without replacement. Across the compound, Oberfeldwebel Karl Merler maintained a small workshop where he attempted to repair German boots with whatever materials became available. His meticulous records showed 214 repair attempts in his first 3 months of captivity. Of these, only 79 pairs were returned to service, the rest deemed beyond salvage. The leather had hardened and cracked. Hobnails had worn to dangerous smoothness. Waterproofing had failed months before. Yet, pride runs deep. Each morning, prisoners polished their deteriorating footwear with improvised materials, coffee grounds, candle wax, even mud for coloring. They marched in formation with straight backs and lifted chins, ignoring the discomfort that became increasingly difficult to hide. The turning point came unexpectedly, through the camp's voluntary labor program. Under the Geneva Convention, prisoners could work in non-military capacities for small wages. At Camp Shelby, this primarily meant agricultural labor on nearby farms facing severe worker shortages. The camp ledger recorded 1,245 prisoners participating, earning 10 cents per hour in commissary credit. Brenner initially refused participation, considering such work beneath an officer's dignity. His diary entry from May 15, 1944, revealed his perspective. Some men have surrendered more than their weapons. They surrender their pride when they harvest American crops for American pennies. Yet, as summer temperatures rose, the practical reality of inadequate footwear became impossible to ignore. Mississippi humidity and heat proved devastating to European-made leather treated for continental winters. Boots designed for the Russian front disintegrated in southern swamps. Camp medical records showed a 63% increase in foot-related ailments by June: blisters, infections, fungal conditions. The infirmary treated 211 cases in a single week. Dr. Samuel Richardson, camp physician, noted in his medical log, "German prisoners suffering needlessly from footwear unsuitable for local conditions. Recommend immediate replacement with standard-issue service shoes." The recommendation reached Camp Commander Colonel Robert Thompson, who approved requisitioning 500 pairs of American service shoes, allocation dependent on work participation. When the announcement came, reactions split the camp. Some prisoners saw acceptance of American footwear as capitulation, a symbol of defeat beyond the battlefield. Others viewed it pragmatically, a necessary adaptation to immediate circumstances. The debate raged through barracks for 3 days, with informal votes and heated arguments. Mueller, the boot repair specialist, examined the American service shoe with professional interest rather than political baggage. His assessment, recorded by a bilingual guard, proved unexpected. American leather quality exceeds our late-war production. The stitching pattern distributes stress more effectively than our standard design. The waterproofing compound appears superior, though I would need 6 months of testing to confirm this. This technical evaluation, coming from a respected tradesman, shifted the conversation from ideology to practicality. Men who dismissed American products as inferior now crowded around to hear detailed comparisons from someone who understood the craftsmanship involved. The camp's monthly supply report documented the change. Initial distribution of 88 pairs of American service shoes to agricultural work detail. Prisoners requested examination period before committing to wear. Second day, all 88 pairs in use. Additional requests received, 140 and growing. What began as reluctant acceptance transformed into unmistakable preference. By the third week, prisoners working farm details arrived early to secure American footwear. Some offered extra commissary credits to move up the allocation list. A few attempted to keep their issued pairs when rotating back from work details, claiming their German boots had been lost or destroyed. Sergeant Michael Collins, who supervised the equipment room, recorded the transformation with amusement. "The same men who mocked our inferior shoes now invent reasons why they cannot possibly return to their German boots. Yesterday, Corporal Schmidt claimed a sudden foot condition that only American shoes could accommodate. His previous boots were apparently causing unnecessary suffering under the Geneva Convention." The quality difference reflected more than just shoes. It revealed fundamental contrasts between industrial capacities and national priorities. American factories operated without bombing interruptions, with abundant raw materials and standardized production lines. German manufacturing, once the envy of the world, suffered under constant Allied air raids, material shortages, and desperate compromises in quality. Captain Whitfield's August report noted, "The footwear situation serves as visible proof of what prisoners are slowly accepting, that American industrial capacity represents a force their leadership grossly underestimated. The psychological impact of this realization extends beyond mere comfort. It challenges their fundamental understanding of why this war was lost." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. As summer turned to fall, the transformation continued. Brenner, the officer who initially refused American shoes, found himself facing a personal reckoning. His diary entry from September 2, 1944, revealed this inner conflict. "My feet have not blistered in 3 weeks. The American shoes distribute weight differently. I stand straighter at the end of the day. This small comfort feels like betrayal to admit, yet denying it seems equally dishonest." The change manifested beyond comfort. Prisoner medical records showed foot-related sick calls dropped 74% among prisoners who switched to American footwear. Productivity in agricultural work details increased by 26%, according to farm supervisor reports. Men returned from 10-hour shifts with energy for evening activities rather than collapsing on bunks to nurse swollen feet. Lieutenant David Abrams, a Jewish-American officer whose family had fled Germany in 1936, served as a translator at Camp Shelby. His personal correspondence, later donated to the National Archives, captured the subtler shifts in the psychological process. These men arrived convinced of German superiority in all things: weapons, tactics, equipment, even moral character. Now they quietly request American shoes, hoard American soap, and read American newspapers when they think no one notices. The mythology of the fatherland's superiority dissolves one small comfort at a time. The transformation extended beyond utility into unexpected directions. Prisoners began customizing their American shoes with distinctive lacing patterns, unique polishing techniques, and personalized markings along the heels. What began as reluctant acceptance evolved into pride of maintenance. Informal competitions arose for the best-preserved pairs. Camp records from October 1944 noted an unusual request. Prisoners asked permission to send their worn German boots home as packages while keeping their American footwear for daily use. The official response acknowledged this milestone: "Request approved with inspection. This represents tangible acknowledgement of quality disparities previously denied. Recommend approval as beneficial to ongoing re-education efforts." The footwear that German soldiers once mocked became coveted possessions. Men who had fought across Europe in Wehrmacht boots now refused to wear anything else. The same hands that once polished jackboots for inspection now cared for American leather with equal attention. The transition complete without formal acknowledgement. When winter arrived in Mississippi, bringing unexpected cold and rain, the final test of the American shoes came in conditions more familiar to European soldiers. Camp maintenance logs recorded no increase in footwear-related complaints, despite 3 weeks of mud and freezing temperatures. The shoes that prisoners had dismissed as suitable only for parades proved more weatherproof than their German-made counterparts had ever been. By December 1944, as news of the Battle of the Bulge reached the camp, creating tension and renewed patriotic fervor among prisoners, one aspect remained unchanged. Virtually every man continued wearing American footwear. Even the most ardent Nazi sympathizers, who refused to acknowledge Allied superiority in any other aspect, silently conceded this small battle of manufacturing quality. Brenner's final diary entry on the subject, dated Christmas Eve 1944, revealed how thoroughly perceptions had shifted. Mueller examined a newly arrived prisoner's boots today, manufactured in Dresden, December 1944 production. The leather is processed tree bark. The rubber soles contain no actual rubber. The eyelets are painted wood. He says this represents our homeland's desperate material shortages. I cannot bring myself to tell the young man that the American shoes he mocks are superior in every measurable way to what our finest German factories now produce. This realization that quality had been compromised far beyond what frontline soldiers knew represented more than footwear failure. It exposed the gap between propaganda and production reality, between promised German engineering excellence and the desperate material substitutions of a nation running out of everything. The shoes became tangible evidence that contradicted years of indoctrination about German industrial supremacy. Every step taken in American footwear reinforced the uncomfortable truth that the Reich's manufacturing capacity, once the pride of Europe, had fallen behind its democratic counterpart in ways that affected every soldier personally. As 1944 ended, Camp Shelby's requisition records showed an unexpected line item, a request for 2,000 additional pairs of American service shoes specifically allocated for prisoner use. The justification cited both practical benefits, reduced medical issues, increased work productivity, and psychological impact, tangible demonstration of American industrial capacity. The shoes that entered the camp as objects of mockery had become silent ambassadors of American production capability, each pair representing factory capacity beyond anything the Reich could match in its final desperate years. As 1945 began, the camp's dynamic shifted with news from Europe. The Battle of the Bulge had failed. Soviet forces pushed westward, and Allied bombers operated with impunity over German cities. POWs gathered around contraband radios and smuggled newspapers, their expressions growing more somber with each broadcast. Yet amid this geopolitical transformation, a smaller revolution continued within Camp Shelby, centered on footwear. The January 1945 Camp Inspection Report noted, "Prisoner footwear now 82% American-made, with remaining German boots preserved as mementos rather than worn regularly." What began as necessity had evolved into preference so complete that newly arriving prisoners faced immense peer pressure to abandon their Wehrmacht-issued boots for American alternatives. Major Raymond Hollis, who replaced Colonel Thompson as camp commander in December 1944, implemented a more structured re-education program for prisoners. His first staff meeting minutes recorded a telling observation.
Footwear transition provides framework for broader industrial comparison. When men recognize superiority in something touching them daily, they become receptive to questioning other assumptions. The educational officers seized this opportunity. Technical comparisons expanded beyond shoes to encompass clothing, equipment, vehicles, and weapons. German prisoners who initially defended Reich production standards found their arguments undermined by their own choices. How could they claim German industrial superiority while refusing to wear German boots? Feldwebel Dieter Richter, captured at Normandy and transported to Camp Shelby in August 1944, maintained detailed journals during his captivity. His entries tracked this widening acknowledgement. The American shoes were merely the first crack in our certainty. Now men discuss American vehicles with grudging respect. Werner, who repaired Panzers before capture, says their Sherman tanks use standardized parts that simplify repairs under combat conditions. Our Tigers, superior in armor, required specialized components unavailable at the front. The camp's technical library, originally established for American personnel, began lending engineering and manufacturing journals to prisoners with relevant backgrounds. Checkout records showed increasing interest in American production methods, quality control systems, and material science. POWs with industrial experience requested specific publications about assembly line optimization and interchangeable components. Dr. Heinrich Weber, a metallurgist who had worked at Krupp before being drafted, conducted informal seminars in Compound B. His discussions evolved from defensive comparisons, German steel maintains superior carbon content, to analytical evaluation. American production prioritizes consistency over peak performance, which proves more effective in sustained campaigns. The camp's monthly intelligence summary noted this transformation. Technical discussions among prisoners have shifted from ideological defense of German methods to objective analysis of production differences. This represents significant progress in deconstructing nationalist technical mythology. American shoes became the entry point for broader questioning. If Reich propaganda had been wrong about footwear quality, what other misrepresentations had soldiers accepted without evidence? This question spread through barracks in late-night conversations, creating ripples that extended far beyond mere equipment comparisons. Prisoner work details expanded beyond agriculture into mechanical repair, construction, and light manufacturing. Camp records documented 432 prisoners working in Jackson factories facing severe labor shortages. They encountered American production methods firsthand, observing techniques that contradicted what they had been told about inefficient democratic factories. Johann Schmidt, who had supervised 200 workers at a Dusseldorf munitions plant, wrote to his family, "The factory floor organization here defies everything our managers taught. Workers rotate stations to prevent fatigue. They participate in quality control decisions. Suggestions from the line receive serious consideration from engineers. The result is not chaos as we predicted, but consistent output with remarkably low defect rates." When the letter passed through military censors, Captain Whitfield flagged it for the Re-Education Committee. This represents exactly the type of first-hand discovery we hope to facilitate. The prisoner has independently identified democratic industrial principles that contradict totalitarian management doctrine.
By February 1945, the camp workshop initiated a voluntary skills exchange program. American mechanics demonstrated maintenance techniques, while German prisoners with technical backgrounds shared their expertise. The program's sign-up sheet showed 211 participants in the first month, growing to 354 by April. Master Sergeant Thomas Miller, who supervised the motor pool, documented surprising outcomes. The Germans arrive expecting to teach us, then leave having learned more than they shared. Their training emphasized theoretical understanding, but lacked our practical problem-solving approach. They can explain why an engine works in perfect detail, but our mechanics can repair it twice as fast with half the specialized tools. The difference reflected fundamental industrial philosophies. German engineering prioritized precision components with tight tolerances requiring specialized maintenance. American design emphasized standardization, field repairability, and production speed. Both approaches had merit, but in wartime, the American model proved more adaptable to global deployment. Brenner, whose initial mockery of American shoes had evolved into reluctant admiration, found himself increasingly troubled by these comparisons. His March diary entry revealed, "If we were wrong about something as basic as footwear, what else have we miscalculated? Our leaders promised victory through superior German engineering, yet I watch American factories outproduce our finest facilities by orders of magnitude. One must question the foundation of this miscalculation." This questioning extended beyond material to encompass the human elements of production. POWs working alongside American civilians observed labor relations that contradicted Nazi depictions of capitalist exploitation. They noted union representatives freely discussing conditions with management, safety protocols enforced regardless of production targets, and workers contributing improvement suggestions that received serious consideration. Kurt Meyer, who had supervised forced laborers at a Frankfurt factory, wrote in his personal notes, "The voluntary productivity here exceeds what we extracted through coercion. Workers suggest improvements, correct inefficiencies without fear of punishment, and show personal investment in output quality. I have utilized threats, ration reductions, and physical discipline to achieve lower results than Americans obtain through voluntary cooperation." Camp intelligence officers, reviewing these notes during routine inspections, forwarded them to the War Department's POW re-education program as evidence of ideological shifts. The accompanying assessment stated, "Subject has begun questioning fundamental National Socialist labor principles based on observed American industrial practices. Recommend continued industrial work placement." Shoes, seemingly trivial compared to tanks and aircraft, provided the initial crack in ideological certainty precisely because they affected every prisoner personally. No man could dismiss footwear comfort as propaganda when his own feet experienced the difference daily. From this small admission, larger reconsiderations became possible. The camp newspaper, Shelby Eagle, introduced a new feature in March 1945. Production Facts presented verified statistics about American industrial output without editorial comment. The first issue stated simply, United States factories produced 47 million pairs of military footwear between 1942 and 1944. Current production, 1.8 million pairs monthly. Subsequent issues expanded to other categories. Monthly aircraft production, 8,100. Monthly vehicle production, 47,000. Monthly small arms production, 550,000. No comparisons to German figures appeared. None were needed. Prisoners did their own mental calculations, knowing their homeland's capabilities. The newspaper's circulation records showed initial resistance, only 684 copies distributed in the first week, followed by increasing acceptance, reaching 2,041 by April. Prisoners who initially refused the publication began requesting back issues, particularly those containing industrial statistics. As spring arrived, the camp administration implemented a significant experiment. Major Hollis authorized local newspapers for prisoner barracks with minimal censorship of war news. His justification to higher command stated, "Prisoners have progressed sufficiently to encounter actual information rather than processed propaganda. Their evolving understanding of industrial disparity provides context for interpreting military developments." The first newspapers arrived on April 16, 1945. They contained photographs of bombed German cities, reports of Soviet advances toward Berlin, and detailed coverage of President Roosevelt's death. Camp security reports noted intense but subdued reaction with minimal nationalistic response. Prisoners absorbed these developments with a solemn resignation that differed markedly from the defiant certainty exhibited months earlier. Brenner's diary captured this evolution. "The images of Dresden are unbearable. Entire streets where I once walked now reduced to rubble. Yet what strikes me is not just destruction, but the realization that American bombers operate in daylight with minimal losses. Our once feared Luftwaffe cannot protect German skies. The aerial superiority that seemed impossible in 1942 now appears absolute." The psychological impact extended beyond military developments to encompass civilian implications. Many prisoners had families in cities experiencing Allied bombing. Letters from home, heavily censored and months delayed, contained glimpses of deteriorating conditions, food shortages, power outages, transportation collapse. These personal connections transformed abstract statistics into emotional reality. Johann Keller, a former Luftwaffe mechanic, maintained a journal of aircraft production estimates based on camp newspaper figures. His May entry noted, "If American factories truly produce 8,000 aircraft monthly, they replace their entire 1942 inventory every 90 days. Germany's peak production reached 3,000 monthly in 1944, achieved through slave labor and 24-hour schedules. The mathematical conclusion becomes unescapable. What began with shoes had expanded to encompass entire industrial systems. The men who initially mocked American footwear now calculated production ratios that explained their defeat more effectively than any battlefield narrative. Their technical backgrounds allowed them to appreciate the magnitude of what they were discovering. Major Hollis's quarterly report noted this transformation. Technical prisoners have progressed from reflexive defense of German methods to objective analysis of industrial disparities. They utilize American data to reconstruct production gaps and independently reach conclusions about sustainability. This represents successful internalization of factual framework without overt ideological pressure. The educational approach succeeded precisely because it avoided direct confrontation. Rather than demanding acknowledgement of German inferiority, camp administrators simply provided accurate information and allowed prisoners with technical backgrounds to reach their own conclusions. The evidence spoke more persuasively than any argument. By May 1945, as news of Germany's collapse reached the camp, the atmosphere shifted from reluctant acknowledgement to active curiosity. Prisoner requests for technical materials increased 340% over February levels. The camp library expanded its holdings to include engineering journals, manufacturing textbooks, and industrial management publications.
The camp's work program developed a waiting list for industrial placements. Records showed 624 prisoners requesting assignments in manufacturing settings, with particular interest in automobile production, machining operations, and electrical assembly. The justifications cited on applications evolved from seeking distraction from captivity to professional development opportunity. Dr. Weber's informal seminars expanded to include regular sessions on American industrial methods. Attendance records showed 174 participants for his lecture, Standardization versus Specialization, Contrasting Production Philosophies. The discussion transcript, recorded by a bilingual guard, revealed remarkable candor. German industry's emphasis on specialized components increased performance but sacrificed replaceability. American standardization accepted marginal performance reduction to gain massive production advantages. The war's outcome demonstrates which approach proved more effective under combat conditions. This technical analysis, stripped of nationalistic defensiveness, represented precisely the objective evaluation the re-education program hoped to achieve. Men who arrived convinced of German technological supremacy now engaged in nuanced comparison of industrial methodologies, acknowledging strengths and weaknesses of both approaches. The transformation extended beyond technical matters to encompass broader societal observations. Prisoners working alongside American civilians noted differences in management structure, labor relations, and organizational culture. Their reports, collected through camp intelligence interviews, revealed evolving perspectives on democratic industrial organization. Martin Hauptmann, who had managed a chemical plant in the Ruhr Valley, observed, "American factories operate with surprisingly minimal supervision. Workers understand their responsibilities and execute them without constant oversight. This contradicts everything we were taught about democratic inefficiency and the necessity of authoritarian management." When Germany's surrender became official on May 8, 1945, Camp Shelby administrators prepared for nationalist backlash or depression among prisoners. Instead, most compounds exhibited subdued acceptance. Security incident reports recorded only 7 disturbances among 3,000 prisoners, primarily involving die-hard Nazi adherents attacking fellow Germans who expressed relief at the war's end. The camp psychologist's assessment noted, "Majority have completed transition from nationalist certainty through doubt to factual acceptance. The industrial evidence they've encountered, beginning with personal experience of American shoes and expanding to broader manufacturing comparisons, has prepared them for military outcome that would otherwise appear incomprehensible." As the war ended, the War Department implemented an expanded re-education initiative called the Intellectual Diversion Program. Camp Shelby's existing technical exchange became a model for other facilities. The directive cited the footwear experience specifically. Begin with concrete, personal examples of American quality that prisoners can verify through direct experience. Build from these individual observations toward broader industrial and social comparisons. This approach recognized that abstract arguments about democracy versus fascism gained little traction, while tangible quality differences in everyday objects created openings for broader reconsideration.
The man who admitted American shoes felt better stood one step closer to questioning other nationalist certainties. By June 1945, the camp's focus shifted toward preparation for eventual repatriation. Major Hollis implemented vocational training programs designed to provide applicable skills for post-war reconstruction. Course enrollment records showed highest demand for American production methods, quality control systems, and industrial management techniques. The education officer's report noted, prisoners recognize that post-war Germany will require massive rebuilding. Many expressed desire to implement American manufacturing approaches they've encountered here. The technical knowledge they acquire represents not just personal advancement, but potential national reconstruction asset. Brenner, whose journey from mockery to acceptance traced the broader camp transformation, wrote a final diary entry before transferring to the repatriation center. I arrived believing absolutely in German superiority across all categories, military, industrial, cultural. I depart understanding that we fundamentally miscalculated American capabilities. Their strength lay not in any inherent superiority, but in production systems that maximized output while maintaining consistent quality. The shoes on my feet testify to this reality more eloquently than any propaganda from either side. This personal evolution, multiplied across thousands of technically trained prisoners, represented potential transformative influence in post-war Germany. Men who had experienced American industrial methods firsthand would return to a nation requiring complete economic reconstruction. Their revised understanding would inform rebuilding efforts more effectively than any imposed re-education program. As preparations for repatriation accelerated, camp administrators implemented a final assessment initiative. Technical prisoners received offers to document their professional observations of American methods, with the understanding that these reports would help guide post-war reconstruction. The response exceeded expectations, with 714 prisoners submitting detailed analyses across 37 industrial categories. These documents, later incorporated into military government technical assistance programs, provided insight into how German specialists perceived American production systems. Beyond specific techniques, they revealed fundamental reconsideration of industrial philosophy, from emphasis on peak performance regardless of cost towards standardization, reproducibility, and maintainability. The footwear that prisoners once mocked had initiated a journey of discovery that expanded to encompass entire industrial systems. From personal comfort to national capability, the path of reconsideration followed consistent progression, direct experience challenging propaganda, revised personal assessment extending to related categories, and professional reevaluation of core assumptions. On August 10, 1945, as the Pacific War ended following atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Camp Shelby's administration initiated Phase 1 repatriation processing. The first 500 prisoners selected for return to Germany gathered their meager possessions in the pre-dawn hours. Among them stood Wilhelm Brenner, now visibly thinner but carrying himself with the same military bearing that had marked his arrival 15 months earlier. The quartermaster's final inspection created an unexpected dilemma. Camp policy required prisoners to return wearing German military uniforms when available. For most men, this meant donning threadbare clothing they hadn't worn in months. More significantly, it meant surrendering the American service shoes that had become essential to their daily comfort. Captain James Whitfield, reviewing the processing line, noticed immediate resistance. Men stood in American shoes, German uniforms folded over their arms, refusing to change footwear until absolutely necessary, his report stated. When instructed to prepare fully for transport, multiple prisoners inquired whether they might purchase their issued American shoes rather than revert to German boots. The request, unprecedented in repatriation protocols, moved upward through administrative channels. Major Hollis recognized its significance beyond mere comfort preference. His authorization memo acknowledged practical and symbolic dimensions. Allowing prisoners to retain American footwear serves both humanitarian purposes and reinforces industrial comparison lessons. These men will carry physical evidence of quality differences as they participate in reconstruction efforts. Department of War officials approved the exception with surprising speed. The August 12 directive authorized retention of American-issued footwear by repatriating prisoners at standard government cost of $3.85 per pair, deductible from accumulated work credits. Records show 438 of 500 men in the first repatriation group immediately submitted purchase requests. As Brenner completed his paperwork, the processing clerk noted his accumulated work credits: $94.30 for agricultural labor performed between May 1944 and July 1945. After deductions for personal commissary purchases and the shoe payment, his remaining balance would convert to German currency upon repatriation. "You're taking the American shoes?" the clerk asked, though the answer seemed obvious given Brenner's footwear choice. "I'm taking more than shoes," Brenner replied, tapping his temple. "Some lessons cannot be unlearned." The exchange, recorded in the clerk's daily log, captured the essential transformation. Men who arrived as confident representatives of a supposedly superior military and industrial system departed carrying physical evidence that contradicted their foundational beliefs. The shoes represented not just comfort, but concrete reality that could not be dismissed as propaganda. As the first group departed, Captain Whitfield noted an unexpected ritual. Men carefully packed their original German boots alongside personal possessions, often wrapping them in protective cloth despite their deteriorated condition. When questioned, multiple prisoners expressed similar reasoning. These boots would serve as evidence when describing American industrial capabilities to disbelieving countrymen. "The American shoes tell half the story," explained Oberfeldwebel Karl Müller, the former boot repair specialist. "But without comparison to what we considered adequate, the contrast loses meaning. Together, they tell the complete truth about what we believed versus what we discovered." This insight, that comparative physical evidence carried persuasive power beyond abstract arguments, informed the camp's final educational initiative. Major Hollis authorized a technical documentation program, allowing prisoners with industrial backgrounds to prepare materials comparing German and American manufacturing approaches. The resulting portfolio contained 288 detailed reports spanning military equipment, production methods, material science, and management systems. Dr. Heinrich Weber, the metallurgist whose technical seminars had evolved from defensive nationalism to objective analysis, contributed a 47-page assessment of material quality standards. His conclusion distilled lessons learned through direct observation. American industry prioritized consistency over peak performance, standardization over specialization, and field repairability over theoretical perfection. These priorities proved decisive in sustained global warfare, where replacement and repair capabilities outweighed marginal performance advantages. This assessment, from a man who arrived convinced of German technical superiority, represented successful internalization of factual framework without forced indoctrination. The transformation occurred not through propaganda, but through direct professional observation of industrial evidence that contradicted previous certainties. As the first group departed, camp records documented consistent patterns. 82% of eligible prisoners purchased American footwear for return to Germany. 64% requested technical materials related to American manufacturing methods, and 79% expressed interest in applying American industrial techniques in post-war reconstruction. Captain Thomas Anderson, tasked with interviewing prisoners during exit processing, documented recurring themes in their responses. Subject consistently cites specific quality comparisons that altered their understanding of relative industrial capabilities. The American shoes feature prominently in these narratives, not merely as comfortable items, but as physical evidence that contradicted previous assumptions about American manufacturing quality. When the final repatriation group departed in November 1945, Camp Shelby's 3-year operation as a POW facility concluded. The detailed records maintained throughout this period provided unprecedented insight into how technical perspectives evolved through direct experience. The transformation from mockery to acceptance, documented across thousands of individual cases, offered valuable lessons for post-war occupation policies. The War Department's assessment report highlighted the shoes specifically. The footwear example demonstrates effective persuasion through direct experience rather than propaganda. Prisoners' personal comfort provided entry point for broader technical reconsideration. Future re-education programs should identify similar experiential opportunities where quality differences can be directly encountered rather than abstractly described. As ships carrying former POWs crossed the Atlantic in late 1945, they transported more than men returning home. They carried revised technical understanding that would influence Germany's industrial reconstruction. The American shoes walking onto German soil represented seeds of transformation planted during captivity and nourished through direct experience. The men disembarked into a nation transformed beyond recognition. Cities lay in ruins, transportation systems had collapsed, industrial capacity had diminished to 15% of pre-war levels. Germany needed not just physical rebuilding, but conceptual reimagining of its industrial approach. The returning prisoners, with their first-hand experience of American methods, represented valuable knowledge assets for this reconstruction. Allied occupation authorities recognized this potential. The Technical Industrial Intelligence Committee, established to assess German industrial capabilities, reversed its initial focus to include knowledge transfer initiatives utilizing former POWs with American work experience. The committee's December 1945 directive noted, "Former prisoners who worked in American factories represent trained observers familiar with both systems. Their comparative knowledge provides valuable perspective for reconstruction planning." Wilhelm Brenner returned to a Hamburg neighborhood he barely recognized. Bombing had transformed familiar streets into rubble-filled moonscapes. His family's apartment building remained partially standing. The windows had been replaced with cardboard and scavenged wood. His parents, thin but alive, greeted him with tears and disbelief. They had received no confirmation of his survival until 2 months earlier. After emotional reunions, practical matters dominated conversations. Work possibilities, food sources, heating solutions for the approaching winter. Brenner's American shoes drew immediate attention, not for their origin, but for their intact condition. In a city where functional footwear had become precious commodity, his well-maintained service shoes represented practical advantage. When neighbors inquired about his prison camp experience, expecting tales of hardship, Brenner's responses surprised them. He described agricultural work, technical exchanges, and industrial observations that contradicted prevailing German beliefs about American manufacturing. He showed his original Wehrmacht boots alongside American service shoes, letting the physical comparison speak more powerfully than words.
"Many refused to believe at first," he wrote to Captain Whitfield 6 months later. "They considered my account American propaganda I had internalized through captivity. But the shoes provided evidence they could not dismiss. When I placed German and American footwear side by side and invited direct comparison, even the most skeptical recognized quality differences that contradicted what we had all been told." This pattern repeated across Germany as former POWs returned to communities struggling with material shortages and infrastructure collapse. Their comparative knowledge of American industrial systems, acquired through direct experience rather than academic study, provided valuable perspective for reconstruction efforts. The physical evidence they carried, particularly American shoes still functioning after months or years of use, gave credibility to their technical assessments. In February 1946, the Allied Control Council established the Industrial Reconstruction Advisory Committee, which specifically recruited former POWs with American work experience. Records show 211 former Camp Shelby prisoners participated in this program, contributing technical expertise to rebuilding efforts. Their recommendations consistently emphasized American approaches to standardization, quality control, and production efficiency. Dr. Heinrich Weber, the metallurgist whose technical perspective had evolved dramatically during captivity, received appointment to the committee's Materials Standardization Subcommittee. His first proposal recommended adoption of American quality control methods, specifically statistical process monitoring that maintained consistent standards rather than emphasizing peak performance at the expense of reliability. His justification directly referenced the footwear comparison. German industry traditionally prioritized theoretical performance maximums achieved through specialized production, resulting in excellent products when all conditions remained optimal. American approaches emphasized consistency across mass production, creating reliable performance under varied conditions. The contrast between Wehrmacht boots deteriorating under field conditions while American service shoes maintained functionality demonstrated which approach proved more effective in practical application. The committee approved his recommendation, implementing statistical quality control procedures adapted from American manufacturing systems. This seemingly technical decision represented fundamental shift in industrial philosophy, from German tradition of specialized craftsmanship toward standardized production that prioritized consistency over peak performance. Karl Müller, the boot repair specialist who had meticulously documented footwear deterioration during captivity, found unexpected opportunity in post-war reconstruction. In April 1946, he established a small workshop in Stuttgart, producing civilian shoes using techniques he had observed in American footwear. His business license application explicitly referenced manufacturing methods observed during internment at Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Müller's workshop emphasized standardized patterns, interchangeable components, and efficient material usage, principles he had identified through comparative analysis of American service shoes. His initial production, limited by material shortages to 20 pairs weekly, sold immediately despite prices higher than competitors. Customers recognized quality differences that reflected American industrial principles adapted to German craftsmanship tradition. By 1947,
Müller employed 14 workers and produced 200 pairs weekly. His business correspondence with American occupation authorities requested technical publications about footwear manufacturing, specifically mentioning production efficiency methods he had encountered at Camp Shelby. The small workshop represented a microcosm of broader industrial transformation, blending traditional German craftsmanship with American production principles. The Technical Industrial Intelligence Committee's 1947 assessment noted similar adaptations across multiple sectors. Former POWs with American work experience consistently implement hybrid approaches, combining German precision engineering with American standardization and efficiency principles. These adaptations represent organic knowledge transfer more effective than directed technical assistance programs. This pattern, former prisoners applying American methods they had experienced directly rather than studied abstractly, appeared consistently throughout reconstruction efforts. The men who initially mocked American shoes now implemented manufacturing principles they had observed firsthand, often encountering the same skepticism they once expressed themselves. Johann Schmidt, who had supervised a Dusseldorf munitions plant before capture, returned to find his factory destroyed beyond repair. In July 1946, he joined the management team at a newly established electrical components facility.
His personnel file noted significant experience with American production methods through POW work program. Schmidt implemented workflow organization directly adapted from Mississippi factories where he had worked during captivity. His first management directive established worker rotation between stations to prevent fatigue, quality inspection responsibilities for line operators, and regular production meetings where workers could suggest process improvements. These practices, standard in American factories but revolutionary in German industrial tradition, initially met resistance from both workers and managers accustomed to hierarchical organization. Schmidt's response, documented in factory minutes, referenced his personal journey. "I, too, once believed German methods represented the only effective approach. Direct experience proved otherwise. Judge results rather than defending tradition." Within 6 months, the factory exceeded production targets by 23% while maintaining defect rates below industry average. Worker absenteeism decreased 31% compared to similar facilities. The practical results spoke more persuasively than theoretical arguments, gradually overcoming resistance to methods that contradicted industrial traditions. This transformative influence, multiplied across thousands of returning prisoners with similar experiences, contributed significantly to Germany's industrial reconstruction. The American shoes that prisoners had mocked, then accepted, then purchased to take home, symbolized broader journey from ideological certainty through doubt to evidence-based reassessment. Wilhelm Brenner's path exemplified this transformation. In September 1946, he secured a position with Hamburg's Municipal Reconstruction Office, where his American experience proved unexpectedly valuable. His responsibilities included material allocation for rebuilding projects, determining which structures received priority access to scarce construction supplies.
Brenner implemented assessment system based directly on American logistics practices he had observed at Camp Shelby. Rather than allocating materials based on building prestige or political connections, he established prioritization matrix balancing structural necessity, occupant density, and functional importance. This objective approach contradicted traditional German bureaucratic practices that emphasized hierarchy and authority. His supervisor initially rejected the system as excessively mechanical and lacking appropriate deference to social considerations. Brenner's response, recorded in departmental minutes, showed how thoroughly his perspective had evolved. Efficient resource allocation requires objective criteria rather than subjective assessment. I have seen firsthand how American systems maximize output from limited resources through standardized procedures. Our current circumstances demand similar efficiency. After 3 months, trial implementation demonstrated significant improvements in resource utilization. The system received permanent adoption. Brenner's quarterly report specifically referenced his POW experience. The logistics principles observed during internment proved directly applicable to reconstruction challenges. American methods developed for military supply management transfer effectively to civilian resource allocation under scarcity conditions. This practical application of lessons learned through captivity typified the unexpected influence former prisoners exerted on reconstruction efforts. Men who arrived in America convinced of German superiority returned home with comparative knowledge that proved invaluable precisely because they understood both systems from direct experience. By 1948, as Germany's industrial recovery accelerated under Marshall Plan assistance, former POWs occupied key positions throughout manufacturing, engineering, and management sectors. The Industrial Reconstruction Advisory Committee's assessment noted their disproportionate influence. Personnel with American technical exposure consistently demonstrate adaptability, efficiency orientation, and pragmatic problem-solving approaches that facilitate reconstruction progress. The committee's report specifically mentioned footwear manufacturing as representative example. The German shoe industry has undergone remarkable transformation influenced by former POWs who experienced American production methods.
Current German footwear reflects a hybrid approach combining traditional craftsmanship with American efficiency principles, resulting in products that maintain quality while achieving significantly improved production rates. Karl Mueller's Stuttgart workshop exemplified this evolution. By 1948, his operation had expanded to 78 employees, producing 1,200 pairs weekly. His manufacturing combined traditional German attention to material quality with American-inspired standardization, resulting in products that achieved both durability and production efficiency. Mueller maintained correspondence with Captain Whitfield, now discharged and teaching industrial management at Mississippi State University. Their letters, archived in Whitfield's personal papers, documented the continuing influence of Camp Shelby's unplanned experiment in industrial education. In March 1948, Mueller wrote, "Our current production methods would be unrecognizable to my younger self, who once mocked American shoes as inferior mass production. We maintain German standards for materials and finishing while implementing American approaches to standardization and workflow efficiency." Among them, Dr. Heinrich Weber had risen to prominence on the Industrial Standards Commission, where he championed quality control systems directly adapted from American methods he had studied during captivity. Weber's quarterly bulletin became required reading for manufacturing executives across West Germany. His April 1952 editorial addressed the synthesis explicitly. "Those who perceive modernization as threat to German craftsmanship misunderstand the opportunity. We maintain our commitment to quality while implementing systematic approaches to consistency and efficiency. The result surpasses both traditional methods and foreign alternatives precisely because it selectively integrates complementary strengths." This integration manifested most visibly in the footwear industry, where former prisoner Karl Mueller had expanded his operations into what trade publications now called the Stuttgart model. His factory employed 212 workers, producing 4,000 pairs weekly, volume that would have seemed impossible using traditional methods, yet maintaining quality standards that distinguished German products in export markets. Mueller's manufacturing floor combined elements that would have seemed contradictory a decade earlier. Skilled craftsmen operated alongside standardized production lines, traditional quality inspections complemented statistical process controls, and apprenticeship training incorporated efficiency principles once dismissed as American shortcuts. The result represented neither capitulation to foreign methods nor stubborn adherence to tradition, but pragmatic synthesis that outperformed both. A 1952 industry assessment by the European Economic Cooperation Administration specifically cited Mueller's operation. This facility exemplifies successful integration of craft tradition with modern efficiency principles. The resulting products maintain distinctive quality while achieving production volumes previously considered impossible without sacrificing standards. This combination creates competitive advantage unlike either American mass production or traditional European craftsmanship alone. Mueller himself rarely discussed his POW experience publicly, considering it personal rather than professional history. However, his management training materials included a parable that insiders recognized immediately. A craftsman who mocks another's tools without trying them demonstrates not confidence, but fear. Fear that his certainty might require reconsideration if direct experience contradicts established belief. The footwear that German prisoners had once dismissed as inferior now influenced European manufacturing philosophy across multiple sectors. The Stuttgart model expanded beyond shoes to encompass furniture, household goods, and eventually precision instruments and automotive components. Each implementation maintained commitment to quality while incorporating efficiency principles that former prisoners had encountered directly during captivity. Wilhelm Brenner's path exemplified this evolution. By 1953, he had advanced from Municipal Reconstruction Office to Hamburg's Economic Development Authority, where he implemented regional planning approaches that integrated traditional urban design with American efficiency principles. His comprehensive proposal for harbor modernization explicitly referenced both traditions.
We preserve Hamburg's architectural heritage while implementing logistical systems that maximize throughput efficiency. Neither approach alone suffices. Integration creates sustainable advantage. The proposal's success attracted attention beyond Germany. International observers studying Europe's post-war recovery increasingly recognized distinctive approach emerging from the ruins. Neither American nor traditionally European, but pragmatic synthesis that selectively incorporated elements from both traditions. Brenner found himself hosting delegations from France, Italy, and eventually Japan, all seeking insight into what economists now called the German Industrial Renaissance. During one such visit in October 1953, a Japanese industrial delegation toured Hamburg's modernized port facilities. Their questions focused primarily on technical specifications until Chief Delegate Masahiro Tanaka asked a more personal question. What inspired this integration approach? It seems neither fully Western nor traditionally German. Brenner's response, recorded in the delegation's official report, referenced his personal journey. I once believed German methods represented peak achievement requiring no outside influence. Circumstances placed me in position to experience American approaches directly rather than dismiss them abstractly. This comparative knowledge, understanding both systems from direct experience rather than theoretical study, revealed that neither tradition held monopoly on effectiveness. Integration became logical conclusion rather than ideological choice. This insight, that direct experience provided pathway to understanding that abstract arguments could not achieve, extended beyond technical systems to encompass management philosophy, labor relations, and organizational structure. Former prisoners who had worked in American factories returned with first-hand observations of participatory management, quality circles, and worker suggestion programs that contradicted both Nazi labor doctrine and traditional German industrial hierarchy. Johann Schmidt, whose electrical components factory had implemented American-inspired workflow organization, expanded these principles into a comprehensive management approach that the Harvard Business Review later termed consultative authoritarianism, maintaining clear authority structures while creating systematic channels for worker input and process improvement suggestions. His 1954 industry presentation explicitly referenced this evolution. I once dismissed American management as undisciplined democracy that sacrificed efficiency for appearance of participation. Direct observation revealed a more nuanced reality, structured systems capturing worker knowledge while maintaining necessary decision clarity. Schmidt's approach, replicated across multiple industries, contributed significantly to labor peace that distinguished West German Reconstruction from frequent strikes and disruptions in France and Italy during the same period. Workers who felt genuine participation invested themselves beyond minimum requirements, creating productivity advantages that supported Germany's export-driven recovery. By 1955, as Germany joined NATO and regained sovereignty, the economic results spoke eloquently. Industrial production had reached 179% of pre-war levels. Exports exceeded imports by substantial margins. Unemployment had fallen below 5% after reaching nearly 25% in immediate post-war period. The currency reform of 1948 had established stable Deutschmark that inspired international confidence. Construction had replaced bomb damage with modern infrastructure, integrating traditional architectural elements with contemporary efficiency.
This remarkable recovery, termed Wirtschaftswunder, economic miracle, by international observers, built upon foundation that former prisoners had helped establish through their unique comparative knowledge. Men who returned from American captivity with revised technical understanding contributed disproportionately to Reconstruction precisely because they bridged competing traditions, understanding both systems from direct experience rather than theoretical assessment. Their journey from mockery to acceptance to integration represented microcosm of broader German industrial evolution. The process began with small personal admissions, acknowledging that American shoes actually felt better after initial skepticism, and expanded to encompass fundamental reconsideration of manufacturing philosophy, management approach, and economic organization. Carl Mueller articulated this evolution during a rare 1955 interview with trade publication Wirtschaftswoche. My generation received extensive technical education, emphasizing German industrial superiority as scientific fact rather than competitive assessment. We accepted this framework without question until circumstances forced direct comparison. The American shoes that I once mocked as inferior mass production demonstrated quality and durability that contradicted everything we had been taught. This experience taught me to question certainties, evaluate methods based on results rather than ideology, and recognize valuable principles regardless of national origin. This perspective, evaluating approaches based on results rather than ideology, characterized Germany's pragmatic reconstruction. The resulting social market economy combined free enterprise with regulatory framework and social provisions that defied simple categorization as either capitalism or socialism. Like the manufacturing methods that integrated German precision with American efficiency, the economic model represented practical synthesis rather than ideological purity. As 1950s progressed, the direct POW influence gradually diminished through natural workforce evolution. Younger managers and engineers without captivity experience implemented integrated approaches they had learned through formal education rather than personal discovery. Technical schools and universities institutionalized manufacturing principles that former prisoners had introduced through practical application. The knowledge transfer completed its transition from personal experience to systemic implementation. Yet the foundational insight remained relevant. Direct experience provides pathway to understanding that abstract arguments cannot achieve. The men who mocked American shoes until they tried them on had learned this lesson personally, then applied it systematically to Germany's industrial reconstruction. Their willingness to reconsider certainties based on evidence rather than ideology created flexibility that distinguished German recovery from more doctrinal approaches elsewhere. By 1957, as European economic community formation created shared market, German manufacturing had established distinctive identity in global trade. Products labeled "Made in Germany" commanded premium prices based on reputation for quality, reliability, and precision engineering. Yet they emerged from production systems that integrated efficiency principles once dismissed as American shortcuts incompatible with German standards. This seeming contradiction resolved through pragmatic synthesis that former prisoners had pioneered. Carl Mueller's footwear enterprise, now employing 387 workers across 3 facilities, exemplified this approach. Visitors frequently expressed surprise at production volumes achieved while maintaining handcrafting elements associated with traditional German quality.
The explanation lay in systematic integration that maximized each tradition's strengths while minimizing limitations. Mueller's 1957 Management Training Manual explicitly addressed this synthesis. We maintain elements of traditional craftsmanship that contribute measurably to quality while implementing efficiency principles that eliminate unnecessary constraints. This selective integration requires continuous evaluation rather than dogmatic adherence to either tradition. We ask consistently, what matters to final performance? What creates value the customer experiences? What represents tradition worth preserving versus limitation worth transcending? This evaluative approach, distinguishing essential quality elements from habitual practices, characterized broader industrial renaissance. Companies systematically analyzed their production methods, preserving techniques that contributed meaningfully to performance while replacing others with more efficient alternatives adapted from American systems. The results satisfied neither traditionalists nor modernizers completely, but outperformed both approaches in practical application. Wilhelm Brenner,
who had risen to Hamburg's Economic Planning Commission, applied similar integration principles to urban reconstruction. His comprehensive development plan, adopted in 1958, explicitly balanced preservation and modernization. We maintain architectural elements that define Hamburg's distinctive character while implementing contemporary infrastructure that supports economic vitality. Neither approach alone creates sustainable urban environment. Integration achieves what neither tradition could deliver independently. This balanced perspective informed Germany's distinctive reconstruction path, creating cities that maintained historical identity while implementing modern functionality. Unlike either Soviet bloc standardization or American suburban sprawl, German urban renewal created distinctive environments that honored tradition while embracing necessary modernization. As the decade ended, Germany's economic performance had transcended mere recovery to establish new industrial paradigm studied worldwide. Japanese manufacturers sent regular delegations to study what they termed quality-efficiency integration. American business publications analyzed the German manufacturing model that seemed to achieve both quality and productivity previously considered mutually exclusive. Few international observers recognized the unlikely educational journey that had contributed to this synthesis. The story of prisoners who mocked American shoes until they tried them on remained largely personal history rather than public narrative. The men who experienced this transformation focused on applying its lessons rather than publicizing its origin. Their comparative knowledge, gained through direct experience rather than theoretical study, influenced reconstruction through practical implementation rather than ideological declaration. Dr. Heinrich Weber, addressing graduating engineers at Stuttgart Technical University in May 1959, offered a rare public reference to this journey. Your generation inherits manufacturing approach that combines traditions once considered incompatible. This integration emerged not through academic theory, but through practical necessity, when circumstances forced direct comparison between systems previously isolated by ideology. Remember this lesson throughout your careers. Direct experience provides understanding that abstract argument cannot achieve. Question certainties, evaluate methods based on results rather than inheritance, and recognize that no tradition holds a monopoly on effectiveness.
This perspective, questioning certainties based on evidence rather than ideology, characterized Germany's pragmatic reconstruction more broadly. The economic miracle resulted not from ideological purity, but from practical synthesis that integrated complementary strengths while discarding limitations regardless of origin. The former prisoners who contributed to this approach had learned its value personally, one step at a time, in American service shoes they once mocked. By 1960, as new generation assumed leadership positions across German industry, direct influence from the POW experience had largely transitioned into institutional knowledge. Manufacturing methods that began as personal discoveries by former prisoners had evolved into standard practices taught in technical schools and implemented throughout industrial sectors. The origin story faded as the practices themselves became conventional wisdom. Carl Mueller, approaching retirement after building manufacturing enterprise employing over 400 workers, reflected on this evolution in correspondence with James Whitfield, the former Camp Shelby quartermaster now teaching at University of Mississippi. The younger managers and engineers implement integrated production methods without knowing their origin story. They understand these approaches as simply how things are done, rather than deliberate synthesis of competing traditions. Perhaps this represents true success, when innovation becomes so thoroughly incorporated that its revolutionary nature disappears from memory. This pattern, transformative insights eventually becoming conventional wisdom, typified broader German economic evolution. Approaches that once represented radical departure from tradition had become standard practice, their origin stories forgotten as their practical value proved self-evident. The men who mocked American shoes until they tried them on had initiated a journey that extended far beyond footwear to encompass entire industrial philosophy. Yet their personal narratives remained largely private rather than public history.
Wilhelm Brenner, retiring from Hamburg's Economic Planning Commission in December 1960, maintained the American service shoes he had purchased upon repatriation 15 years earlier. Though no longer wearable, they occupied prominent place in his home office, not as American artifact, but as personal reminder of journey from certainty through doubt to evidence-based reassessment. His retirement speech to planning department colleagues made rare public reference to this journey. My generation began with absolute certainties that experience gradually undermined. We learned painful but necessary lesson that direct observation sometimes contradicts inherited belief, that questioning assumptions creates opportunities closed to those who defend tradition without examination. This lesson proved more valuable than any technical knowledge we acquired, for it created flexibility that adaptation requires and dogma prevents. This flexibility, willingness to reconsider certainties based on evidence rather than ideology, distinguished Germany's reconstruction from more doctrinaire approaches elsewhere. The economic miracle resulted not from ideological purity, but from pragmatic integration that evaluated methods based on results rather than origin. The former prisoners who contributed to this approach had learned its value through a personal journey that began with shoes they once mocked and eventually purchased. Their story remains largely overlooked in conventional histories that emphasize economic policies, Marshall Plan assistance, and currency reform.
Yet these men who returned from American captivity with revised technical understanding contributed disproportionately to Reconstruction, precisely because they bridged competing traditions, understanding both systems from direct experience rather than theoretical assessment. The footwear that German prisoners once mocked represented more than mere shoes. They symbolized journey from ideological certainty through doubt to evidence-based reassessment, transformation that thousands of returning prisoners carried into Germany's industrial reconstruction. The resulting synthesis created foundation for economic renaissance that astonished the world, yet began with simple admission that American shoes actually felt better after initial skepticism. Today, Germany's distinctive manufacturing approach, combining precision engineering with production efficiency, craftsmanship with systematic quality control, continues influencing global industry. Few recognize its unlikely educational origin in prisoner of war camps, where technical specialists encountered alternative approaches they had previously dismissed without examination. The men who mocked American shoes until they tried them on initiated industrial evolution that transcended both traditions precisely because they experienced both systems directly rather than abstractly. Their journey reminds us that direct experience provides pathway to understanding that abstract arguments cannot achieve. The shoes that German prisoners mocked until they tried them on taught this lesson one step at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.